Hello and welcome to Republic IAS. In this session, we will take a look at the refugee and asylum framework in India. Recently, Shashi Tharoor has introduced a private member's bill to provide a statutory basis for uh, treatment of refugees and asylum seekers in India. Now, the context is very clear. You are familiar. In the last few years, Rohingya refugees from Myanmar had actually been pouring into Bangladesh, as also some of them into India as well. And apart from Rohingya refugees, there is also this issue which is hitting the headlines from time to time of Chakma refugees in Arunachal Pradesh. You are familiar. Chakma refugees are from Bangladesh, Chittagong Hills tract, and there has been a lot of controversy around them. Chakmas being settled in Arunachal Pradesh. This apart, you are familiar, Afghan students who have actually been studying in India. That issue has also come into focus in the light of takeover of Afghanistan by Taliban. Now, in all these issues, the government of India's approach to the treatment of these refugees, it is said, has been arbitrary. Now, in the absence of a statutory framework, that is, in the absence of a law in India governing refugees and asylum seekers, there has been actually hardly any objectivity and transparency in the treatment of refugees and asylum seekers. So, a kind of ad hocism has actually been governing this issue. So, now let us first look at the current framework governing refugees and asylum seekers in India. Actually, there is no single law but a number of different laws actually governing this issue. I will briefly list out various legislations here. Foreigners Act 1946, Registration of Foreigners Act 1939, Passport Act 1967, Extradition Act 1962, Citizenship Act 1955, and it is actually pertinent to remember that Citizenship Act 1955 has been amended in 2019, bringing some changes to the original 1955 Act. Remember, this amendment has been extremely controversial because it seeks to give primacy to minorities in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. But of course, that's a different issue. So, now this is the crux of the problem. That is excessive discretion in the public officials, and it is said that decisions are arbitrary, lacking in objectivity and lacking in transparency in the treatment of refugees. So, and in fact, Supreme Court has also ruled so in a number of cases. While hearing petitions regarding these refugees, for instance, Supreme Court has highlighted that fundamental rights guaranteed under Article 14, which actually prohibits arbitrariness in decision making. It requires reasonableness in classification. So that the court had ruled, Article 14 had been violated. As also, rights under Article 21, right to liberty and life. So, in the light of all these issues, Member of Parliament Shashi Tharoor fervently has demanded that a statutory framework be introduced in India. So this is the reason for his private members bill. Okay, now a very important issue here. So what is the solution to the problem? Now first is bring in a law and harmonize our statutory framework with the United Nations Refugee Convention 1951. That is the international framework which governs refugees. Now here a very important definition actually. What is the definition of refugee? Now this definition is given under this convention, that is United Nations Refugee Convention 1951. Now under this convention, a refugee is a person who has left his home country for another country for reasons of persecution, and this persecution is on the basis of a number of grounds like race, religion, nationality, social group, or political opinion. So a refugee is a person who has actually left his home country for fear of persecution due on specific grounds. Most of these are specific ascriptive grounds. So this is the definition of refugee, and please remember, in this context it is important to remember that migrants who have left their home country for economic reasons, they are not actually treated as refugees under the UN Refugee Convention 1951. So now what is there is actually a very important principle enunciated in the UN Refugee Convention 1951, and this principle is actually central to any refugee and asylum framework, and this principle is referred to as the principle of non-refoulement. The principle of non-refoulement. I'll spell out NON, non-refoulement, REFOULEMENT, principle of non-refoulement. Now what it means is a refugee cannot be turned back to his home country or to any other country. That is, a refugee who has entered a country, that country must accept the refugee on humanitarian grounds. On humanitarian grounds. And please remember, this issue has come into a lot of focus during the migrant crisis in Europe. These migrants especially coming from the Middle Eastern countries. In that context, please note that Germany had been extremely proactive in accepting those refugees under the principle of non-refoulement. So this is the central pillar of international framework for refugees, that is showing compassion and empathy to refugees who are persecuted in their home countries. So this is the reason why there is a need for a law in India to harmonize India's statutory framework governing refugees and asylum seekers, and to bring in a sense of objectivity and transparency in the treatment of refugees. Remember, India has historically been, it has hosted a number of persecuted communities, Jews, Parsis, Tibetans, Bangladeshis, and of course Tamils from Sri Lanka. So in the great traditions of our nation, we should have a law which actually subscribes to human values. With this, we conclude this session. Thank you for listening to this topic on refugees and asylum seekers in India.